biting my tongue beneath itself, bleaching my language, clenching my jaw with shackled teeth, because the moment I open my mouth, uprising spring from my saliva, my dialogue is cruddy. Trample with the muddy boots of trade and migration, battling nations in my diaphragm, so the rhythm in my diction sounds like a war cry, and despite the white stuff down my windpipe, I talk black with nappy phonics. Syllables that kink and twist, naughty expression that beads on my palate, soul glow in this spit shine flow, Jerry curl jogging, bongo drums in my diction. This slang is semantic resistance, off with the head of the king's English. Can't you smell the riot on my breath? Char in my esophagus, my laugh is arsenic. And ain't enough opiates in this elementary education to hook me on phonics or gentrify the djembe out of my pronunciation. Love the taste of this cornbread accent. Sugar cane slang my tongue is. Motherland, mama of civilization, birth of every nation. Scat, boom, back, hi-hat, jazz, sax. There is music in my melanin, and I be talking hella black. With a neck roll to articulate my tone. Conversations get you high as my cheekbones, and lingo bout lush as these hips done grown. Thick thighs and deep fried vernacular, hand motions and sound effects, hieroglyphics hidden in my messages. My breath is the building of the pyramids on repeat. I'm like a Negro spiritual sampled over a trap beat. There is a black anthem inside my belly, so I will always lift every voice and speak.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Black Effect event. The Black Effect is a 5-day virtual event hosted by the National Plus Coalition and streamed through our sister company, Plus TV and Media Productions. This event will be led by 15 of the most powerful speakers we could find to discuss 15 topics that affect melanated people on a national note. My name is Maria. I'm a tech-savvy ex-military kid who grew up in California, living the female version life of Forrest Gump. I now reside in Colorado. I'm a lover of life, music fanatic, often caught reading, now a justice reform advocate, a clemency pusher, lover of all people, critical thinker, sister, daughter, mother, grandma, who is the push behind the Free Kendall Martin movement. Kendall serving 6 years for possession of marijuana in Mississippi with no possibility parole. Good time. It's a day-for-day sentence. I'd like to introduce you to you today. With me is my lovely co-hostess. Francetta Mays is a native of Oklahoma City, currently residing in Oklahoma City. She's the owner of In Your Dreams Broadcasting Publications and Events LLC, talk show host for Flipping the Script, the current NAAC presidential liaison for the Tulsa chapter number 6143, and she's also a pastor at the Going Hard for Christ Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Ms. Mays became very passionate regarding criminal reform in August of 2021 after hearing the story of Prentice Pons, a man serving life plus 25 years for a fistfight in his home. And since then, she has been relentless in her endeavors to now change the narrative for everyone through her work in the community and abroad. Ms. Mays now uses her voice and platforms to bring awareness and enlist the assistance of people no matter the nationality or background. She dares to believe that each one can reach one, then affect the lives of many.
Hi, Maria.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone that has participated in any capacity with the Black Effect. I think that now is the time and the season for us to really reach out into our information banks and dig up anything that we can do. We each have a part to play. And Maria, I thank you. I know on short notice you had to take this, to step in as the hostess. And I thank you so much for being flexible and willing as well as everyone that had a hand in it, Brooke, Kent, everyone. I'm just looking so forward as I was looking over the agenda that we have coming up over the 5 days. I'm really excited. And so we're going to go into, I believe, the day one history. How did we get here? And look at Hakim Nathaniel Crampton, who is serving a 4-year term as commissioner on the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission. He's appointed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2019, making Crampton the first formerly incarcerated person appointed to a state commission, proudly representing the public's interest on this commission and the current chair of the MIDC Equity and Inclusive Committee. Hakeem has spent the last 15 years advocating for juvenile, criminal, and education justice, engaging communities across Michigan and mentoring thousands of Michigan students across the state, teaching English language arts through an innovative textbook curriculum, series of hip-hop based pedagogy called SLAM. The initials is SLAM, Lyrical Education. Hakeem serves as the movement and capacity building specialist for Just Leadership USA, a national criminal justice leadership development organization focusing on empowering persons with past criminal court involvement to advocate for systems and policy change within the criminal legal system. Hakeem also works collaboratively with, boy, that was a big word, with community-based organizations to improve the quality of life for Jackson's South Side residents experiencing poverty, gun violence, and disenfranchisement. As a community organizer and education advocate, Hakeem has received over 24 local, state, and national awards for his service to schools, communities, and organizations. His term on the commission expires in April of 2023. I would like to introduce our audience to Hakim Nathaniel Crampton, the director of Amen for Youth, LLC.
It is definitely an honor and a pleasure to be invited to this very important, critical national conversation by the National Plus Coalition and its various partners. I want to thank you all for inviting me and accepting me into this distinguished group of presenters for this week-long conversation about the Black effect and its importance in our lives today as we talk about the diaspora of Black folks spread across the world and our origins and our history and our culture and our legacy and what that means for us today as much as what it meant for those of us in the past. So I'm going to lead this conversation by pivoting a definition of what is history. History is considered to be the whole series of past events connected with something or someone. And we're going to be talking about the past events associated with our history, with the history of those whom have been called in the English language Black, right? And we're going to use that. We're going to continue to use that terminology. It's the language we're currently speaking. Language is very, very important. One of the things about language and its etymology is that when you understand the source and origin of a word, it takes you pointedly to its genuine, true meaning, right? And that's the same way with the people. When a people understands and knows their history and is connected to the source of the etymology, to their origins, then the value, the point of who they are, the meaning of whom those people are becomes that much more exact, that much more important. So once again, you've heard my bio. My name is Hakim Crampton. I am from Michigan. I'm excited to be here. I work in a number of capacities. And this particular capacity tonight is about talking about the history. How did we get here? In order to discuss how we got here, it's critically important to discuss, in fact, where we came from. So I'm going to talk about the effect, talk about the historical legacy of the Black civilization across the world. The legacy of our history, for example, it matters in the present. And why does it matter in the present? Because, of course, as we talked about the history and legacy of and culture of a people, the present originates from the past, and the past is what sets the stage for the future. So the foundation of the past is what builds upon the solid foundation and infrastructure for which we build our future. So I want to start off by using the definition of the word legacy now. Legacy is a thing handed down by a predecessor. It's a thing handed down by a predecessor. So I want to talk about the effects of cultural legacy as we talk about the history and origin of the Black civilization. Nelson Mandela says that our rich and varied cultural heritage has a profound power to help build our nation, right? You hear that? Our rich and varied cultural heritage has a profound power to help build our nation. That's from Nelson Mandela. That quote sets the stage for our discussion about the effects of cultural legacy. What is cultural legacy then? Alan Chang, who is an Asian, in 2019, he is quoted as saying, "A cultural legacy is the inheritance of cultural traits that influence our success or failure. They are often determined by cultural practices from centuries ago that have been passed down through each generation." And once again, that's Alan Chang, an Asian, in 2019, quoted as saying that. Now I want to cross-reference that quote with the quote from 100 years earlier from the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who wrote in 1920 and spoke at a speech, "A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." Once again, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Marcus Garvey in 1920. And contrast that with Mr. Alan Chang, who set the stage to talk about Asian heritage, the importance of cultural heritage, right? Because, and the reason I pivot these two together is because Black folks of the diaspora and the worldwide, there's been a discontinuation of the tradition of culture being passed from generation to generation, specifically Black folks in America and of the diaspora that have been taken from Africa, right? And connecting back to that history has been extraordinarily difficult in light of the fact that when a people is disconnected from their origin, from their source, it's very difficult to reconnect that. So this Asian culture and history, Chinese culture and history, Japanese culture and history, Mongol culture and history, Far East Asian culture and history, there hasn't been too many breaks in their culture. They've always been able to successfully resist to a great extent assimilation, right? And as a result of that, they've been able to maintain cultural hegemony, meaning that their culture has been successfully transmitted generation after generation. Listen to what Alan Chang once again says about the value and importance of cultural legacy. He says, "A cultural legacy is the inheritance of cultural traits that influence our success or failure. They are often determined by cultural practices from centuries ago that have been passed down through each generation." Why is that critically important today in light of what's happening today in America and what has been happening the last 400 years in this country? What's critically understand is that those cultural traits that influenced our success or failure, see, the culture, the African, the origin, the Aboriginal culture that we had prior to coming in contact in America in the last 400 years with enslavement by Europeans, that culture, that tradition was disconnected. It was no longer allowed to be transmitted from Kunta, right, to Toby, right? It was no longer allowed to be transmitted from King Joffrey to William, right? William became a new person. Toby became a new person. King Joffrey and Toby, right? And Kunta, that cultural heritage was disconnected. The names, right? The religion, the psychology, the sociology, right? The mindset had been shifted because there was a break. So therefore, the influence upon our success or failure was based upon the new tradition, the new culture that we inherited. That new culture, new tradition that we inherited was in fact a new slave culture, a new slave history. We started our new history, is where we talk about today, how Black history didn't start with American Black history. They didn't start with slavery. That's because they wanted to begin a new people with a new history, a new start in slavery, rooted in slavery, so that their history will be tied back to slavery, so that their legacy in the future would be connected to slavery. So Marcus Mosiah Garvey, 100 years ago, said this: a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots, subject to easily be pushed over and uprooted from the soil. So today we have been uprooted from our soil, and the effects of that has been psychologically damaging. The effects of that uprooting has been death for our people. And so it's critically important that as we discuss the history and how do we get here, we have to understand that we're talking generations and thousands of years of historical purveyance that had been stopped and cut off within the last 400 years. And this uprooting has been done on a massive scale, a sociological scale, a global scale, an academia scale. They have replaced research, historical knowledge with misinformation and mishistorical knowledge. Research that is not correct and accurate, that would give credit to the origins and source of civilization and medicine, astronomy and science and technology, right? So we have been disconnected from the ancient source of our tradition and culture. And it's critically important that we reconnect it, right? And so what types of legacies must we reconnect, though? Because coming from a great tradition that was uprooted from us and taken from us, how do we reconnect from something that has been taken from so long ago, right? And disconnected from us and denied us access to it, so that we have to dig deep to find in the research and the annals of history and historical documents and pages to find the true history of who we were. Well, we have to discuss the 4 different types of legacies first and foremost, because if we're going to talk about build a future legacy and reconnecting to the past, right, from which our predecessors were cut off from us, and we're going to build a new future, we have to understand the types of legacy we're going to leave for the next generations to come. The first legacy is the emotional legacy. That is the most critical and important legacy that a people passes on to its successive generations. Why? Because that emotional legacy starts and begins in the womb, the connection of that mother, right? The genetic and biological connection to the source of that child's origin. That emotional legacy begins right there. And what happens inside the womb, the relationship that that womb has with the rest of its family and loved ones that is nurtured inside that child, that emotional legacy is then born into the world. And that birthing, that emotional legacy begins to give birth and uproot to the first legacy, the first culture of that child's life, right? And so it's critically important that we understand what's then fed into that child during that emotional stage, during that nurturing stage that child is born into, in which that child is being prepped and prepared for its rites of passage into society, into life, to take its rightful place in the culture, to lead the culture into the next future generation of our history, to sustain it. Well, that rites of passage then merges into the spiritual legacy, because then as we foster that emotional legacy and build that emotional foundation and that nurture of love in that child, we must then imbue that child with spirituality, with the firm foundation of its faith, right? That child that connected to the spiritual ontology of the universe, that child connected to the infinite universe in which its source and origin gives birth to that child and to the cosmos and everything connected to it. That child then begins to get its spiritual legacy, in which is poured into from the elders of the community and the spiritual wise ones of the community. And they pour into that child and give that child its spiritual legacy. And the community as a whole is responsible for the next legacy, the social legacy, for what that society then builds from within that emotional and spiritual legacy. They must then build a social legacy And that social legacy must be based upon that emotional foundation, that nurture and love for each other and family, and that spiritual foundation, that guidance, that shared moral values that guides the people into its final legacy, its historical legacy. All of those wrapped into one is the cultural legacy of a people. We've best seen this in the autobiography, or not the autobiography, but in the narrative called Roots by Alex Haley, the saga of an American family. And we've best seen that played out in that book and ultimately in the movie, because that book and that movie was supposed to show us how we are connected to a historical legacy, a source. And by being connected to that historical legacy and source, it in fact gives us a vision for the future. It gives us a sense of appreciation and value for who we are as a people. That was the power of Alex Haley's book's Roots. It was powerful, and it contained all four legacies. There was an emotional legacy. When you think about the beginning of the movie, the beginning of the book, this child being birthed and brought into this world with the nurturing and love, and then simultaneously the spirituality was connected. And then the people gathered around to support that, right? And that's that emotional, spiritual, and social legacy, which then gives birth to what ultimately became the story, the saga of the life of a people. And that's the historical legacy. It's critically important to understand those four legacies. So how do we move from those four legacies to build a future? Well, what is a future? So a future is the time or period following the current moment. So after I finish speaking, the next moment is the future. Tomorrow is the future. Next week is the future. Next year is the future. And 100 years from now is the future. A people who leave a future to its people, right, are a people who have done its job to society. Because for what do we live for but to the appreciation of those that lived before us, that blessed us with the life to live. And we are then obligated to bless others with that same gift of life. So the effects of the future, and we understand what the effects of the past have been like from the separation of the last 400 years when we have been disconnected from our history and culture. We understand the effects of our future. Our future has been arrested. Our current place right now, which was the future of the generations that were enslaved in this country, right? That future is our now. We understand the effects of our now. Our now is an arrested development. We have been disconnected from our history, disconnected from our spirituality, disconnected from our sociology. We've been disconnected from all of those elements, so we no longer have a real strong, vibrant legacy. So we still owe an obligation to the future generation to build a greater civilization for them, a greater cultural legacy, a greater cultural inheritance for them. So what is the impact of heritage on legacy? Well, when we put these quotes together that I quoted in the front, Mr. Chang and the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the impact of heritage on legacy is this, that the inheritance of cultural traits, right, that influence our success or failure, those cultural traits we have to begin to appreciate and begin to reinvent within ourselves, because it is cultural traits, and cultural traits are practices, these are traditions, and our current traditions within our culture, we don't even have a proper description for them because we are all over the place. We're self-destructive. We're psychologically enslaved, right? We're still Jim Crowed in our mind, right? We're still Willie Lynched in our thinking and behavior, right? So our current cultural traits and practices are not the types of traits that a people needs in order to actually allow generations to pass the rights to the next generation. So we're not properly raising our next generation of children to be the leaders in society. So it's the cultural traits and practices and traditions we must focus on. We must focus on how do we get here and understand that we have been cut off from our history and culture, and that because we have no roots, we need to teach the roots to the people so they can be rebirthed back to the people, so they can be reborn, so to speak, right? By being recreated into the soil. We have to be rebirthed back in the soil, because these cultural traits are important. We understand that our behavior and our characteristics that people have stigmatized and stereotyped, We understand what those stereotypes do to us. We understand that being castigated negatively in such a way detracts from our ability to grow, right, from between that stuck in concrete. So we have to focus on those cultural traits, those traditions that re-enlive people, that a people begin to then pass on to the next generation. Because if we fail to pass on positive cultural traits to the next generation is worse off than the previous generation. And Marcus Garvey says, without knowledge of our history, our origin, our culture, we are like a tree without roots. We're like a tree without roots. And if we don't have roots, we're no longer producing fruit. And when we're no longer producing fruit, that means we're no longer producing shade. We're no longer producing sustenance for the people. And that's what we see happening in our society today. That's what we see happening in the Black community today. The effects of the past, which is our current, the past future they were building, which is our current, the effects of that have been negative. The effects of that have negatively impacted our current. So it's critically important that we focus on that. So in these last final minutes, I want to focus on the 3 legacies to sustain. Number 1, we must sustain a values-based behavior pattern. Those are cultural traditions and practices. Values-based behavioral patterns. These are cultural traditions and practices. We don't have any systematic cultural practices. We practice other people's religion, other people's cultural customs, right? We practice other people's traditions and ways. We don't have our own. So we must focus on that by building a values-based behavioral pattern. Secondly, is we must instill them in a communal way, meaning that we must institutionalize our behavior. Our values-based behavior must become institutionalized, meaning we must create them as traditions in our community, where we have annual fairs and Juneteenth celebration and Black Excellence Awards. We must institutionalize our values-based behavior as communal traditions. Those are the 2 together. Thirdly, is we must focus on the knowledge, the educational component of our history, our origin, and our culture. We are responsible for passing these 3 sustaining cultural legacies on to the next generation, and that is building a values-based behavioral system that becomes then a communal tradition, becomes communal practices, customary cultural practices, and then finally, knowledge. We must begin to teach this, institutionalize this, preserve the history of our people, our knowledge, our history, our practice, our behavior, so that our people have a solid foundation to continue watering the trees to give life-sustaining future to each and every one of us. The effect of our future is on us. We must take the responsibility and the leadership today so that we can lead this for tomorrow. I salute you and thank you all for joining me in this conversation, this opening conversation about the Black effect and the history. How do we get here and where do we go? We know how we got here and we know where we got to go. So let's march forward together as one unified people. Soldier salute 1.
Thank you, Hakeem. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to, let me introduce Covina Bantushango, is a Southern regional representative of the African Socialist Party. Kobina met the chairman in the Uhuru movement on the Mall in Washington, D.C. at the 10-year anniversary of the Million Man March. Kobina purchased Omari Yeshitela Speaks and knew at the moment this was an organization that would lead us to our liberation. Kobina went to his first APSP plenary in St. Petersburg, Florida, January of 2006. It was at the plenary that he recognized that this was the organization that had married theory and practice, the answer to African people's future. Kobina has been a member of the APSP since that plenary. Uhuru.
Yeah, I think I was muted when I first started talking. Yeah, so I appreciate that. But I wanted to appreciate that introduction, and I salute the organizers of this the opportunity for giving me the opportunity to be on the panel, and I really appreciate all of the organizers for organizing this event. And I know these things are not they're not easy to do, and I know everybody in different places. So I really salute the organizers of this event and also the opportunity to be able to be here today. And like she said, I am the Southern Regional Representative of the African People's Socialist Party. And the African People's Socialist Party is a revolutionary party that, organizes all over the world to continue the work of, Marcus Garvey and to unite African people all throughout the world with the intent for us to govern over our own lives and to have the power necessary to end colonialism and for us to have control over our resources, human and natural. And that's who we are as the African People's Socialist Party, led by Chairman Omari Yeshitela, who is the leader and founder of the movement, and the leader of the whole African world. Because, like I said, he continuing the work of Marcus Garvey. And I want to start, with a quote from Mayo, and one of the things that he said that I thought, lays out what our responsibilities are is the cardinal responsibility of leadership is to identify the dominant contradiction at each point of the historical process and to work out a central line to resolve that. And in saying that is that we have to be able to be clear on what it is that the contradiction is. Because if we're not clear on the contradiction is, what the contradiction is, the oppressor, the colonizer, our enemy could easily redirect us and have us on a narrative that ultimately contributes to our own oppression, and you see that a lot. And then if they have like colonialism want to have a monopoly on defining, two things, our reality and also defining or have a monopoly on violence. So if you don't go along with what they put forward, then they can kill you and call you a terrorist. That's how we see it all the time. We can see it on TV where they kill Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old on a playground with a toy, and somehow he's responsible for his death. You know what I'm saying? But, we have to be able to put out a different narrative to really show who the real terrorist and who the real colonizer is. And this is why it's so important for us to have our own theory and our own narrative. And we put out our own narrative consistently because we have the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the longest lasting revolutionary paper in history, where you can, it tells our story from our own perspective and in our own interest. And so we have to have our own theory, our own worldview, because if we don't have our own worldview, then we own the worldview of the oppressor. And even when we come up with great solutions and do great work, if it's on the same narrative as the oppressor, it ultimately feeds and contributes to, our own oppression. And we have to be able to identify these things, like Miles said, and overturn that and come up with a line that is clear for us. Because one thing that we are clear on is that the oppressor and oppressed, the slave and the slave master, cannot have the same interests. That's two different interests, material interests. The slave want to be free and the slave master want to keep you enslaved. And if you go along with the slave master is telling you, then again, that puts you in a position to want to enjoy slavery in some type of way, or get it, or be more comfortable in slavery. So as African internationalists, and this is the worldview of the African working class, and a theory that was developed, and a worldview that was developed by Chairman Omari Yeshitela. African internationalism is the revolutionary scientific and materialist worldview and theory of the African working class. This falsifiable theory recognizes that European wealth and African impoverishment occur as a result of the European attack on Africa, the division of Africa, African slavery, and the dispersal, colonialism and neocolonialism. And one of the things that Kwame Nkrumah stated was that neocolonialism is the last stages, or he wrote a book about neocolonialism is the last stages of imperialism, which means that white power and blackface is the last trick that the colonizer has, because they can no longer oppress you with their own tactics. And so what they have to do is find somebody that look like you, that sound like you, that do things like you, that have your same type of antics, where they will be able to convince you to go in the way of the colonizer or the slave master. So we have to be able to look at, when I read the definition of African internationalism, we have to have our own perspective and our own agenda, because if we're on their agenda in any kind of way, and that's what Garvey was doing. Garvey is what he called himself as an African fundamentalist. He was about taking power. Garvey said that he didn't see a flag nowhere in the world that black people, that African people could pledge allegiance to. So he said he created one. And we have to take that same type of initiative. We have to see what actually works in our best interest, not the best or the lesser of two evils, that sometimes they say along with the Democratic and Republican Party, but what works in our best interest, and what is it in our best interest to do. And we have to chart a course that's going to be able to get us from point A to point B. We have to bring those type of solutions, because we have to plan to govern ourselves to be able to meet our own needs. You know, no other person or people going to be able to look out for the best interests of African people, because we have to be clear that the U.S. and colonialism, the only way that it progresses is at our expense. You know, we don't get laptops and cell phones and vehicles and tires, you know, without us being colonized. You know, the way that we get the tires that we put on our car is because some children are being forced to go mine the rubber trees. We get diamonds, we get coltan, the things that make the computers and electronics work. 80% of the world coltan is in the Congo, you know, and it's children that's being forced to mine, where they're getting their arms severed and things like this. This is the part of the thing of things that everyday people don't normally see, because that's not the propaganda that they're going to put in front of you. They're going to just show you, just going to have a choice between which title you want, Goodyear or Michelin. They don't show you that the way that they got the tires to put on your car came from this process that it forced people that lost their limbs, African people that lost their limbs. And this is the process that happens all over the world. This is colonialism, and America has a pedestal that it sits on, where the only way that it progresses is at African people's expense. So this is not, so sometimes people say, well, that happened so long ago. This happened today. This happened today, you know, and so this is what we looked at. When we look at the question around what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, you best believe that the U.S. is pushing an agenda, but we have to have a worldview that helps us understand the question in our interest. And what is in our interest? You know, and we clear that uniting with Russia is in our interest, because what the U.S. is doing is trying to overturn and keep Russia out of a process that keeps us colonized. And Russia has been fighting against that, you know, since its inception. So, you know, we have to be able to understand our own narrative, our own worldview. We have to have that, because if we don't have our own worldview, what we're stuck with is the worldview of the slave master. And if we stuck with the worldview of the slave master, even our greatest minds and even our greatest work will only contribute to us being colonized. So we have to be able to be clear on those things. And then, you know, to talk a little bit about reparations, the question around reparations, you know, the African People's Socialist Party has been getting reparations. We had a tribunal, the first world tribunal on reparations in 1982. And it was in that moment, because again, our goal is to govern. Our goal is to take power, not to fight ideas that's in white people's head, but to get the power to say that no matter what's in your head, you don't have the ability or the power to be able to prevent us from being able to live. And this is the problem that's been happening. Colonialism gives them the power to continue to oppress and terrorize everybody to be able to keep the resources that exhibit. And we have a responsibility to take power and prevent that from happening. And part of that is even how they colonized the world, and they carved Africa up at the 1884 conference in Berlin, Germany, where they decided who gets what of Africa. No African people there. They decided that France get this portion of Africa, the U.S. get this portion of Africa, and they carved it up amongst the European, what they call colonial mothers. And so this is a contradiction, because this means that at this point, Europe and America begins to excel, but is at the expense of Africa and African people. And so we have to destroy these artificial borders, because none of these artificial borders existed prior to colonialism. None of these countries existed before colonialism. And this is what Kwame Nkrumah was fighting for when he was trying to get a United States of Africa to destroy these artificial borders that was created. And it's not nothing new, because they did the same thing here. When you talk about America, how do you come and kill off the indigenous people here, and then the people that you don't kill, you push them back and draw a line and say, even though you was here yesterday, if you come across this line now, you're an illegal immigrant. And this is no longer Mexico, this is New Mexico. I mean, it makes no sense. But if you only have that narrative, you begin to buy into that somebody is an illegal immigrant. The only illegal immigrant on this land is white people, is Europe, what they consider European people. But even Europe is a new concept, because the only way they came into this nation of European people was in relationship to finding us. And they said that it would be better for them to unite in order to conquer the whole world. And they began to terrorize and pillage the whole world. But in 1982, we had the first World Tribunal on Reparation. And it was in that meeting where the first time in history, we was able to quantify the amount in labor alone that was owed to African people in 1982. And in 1982, I think it was something like $44 trillion in labor alone, not anything else. In labor alone in 1982, it was quantified that they owed us $44 trillion, which means they owe us everything they got. And it's not like they stopped there. You have the prison system now, where it's just another form of slavery. And we have to overturn all these contradictions, because the real criminals are not going to jail. You know what I'm saying? The real criminals are not being imprisoned. They naming holidays after the real prisoners. Columbus killed, something like 4 million indigenous people in what they now call Haiti in like a 4-year time period. But this is the contradiction that we face with. We have to be able to not only sum up the history from our own perspective, in our own interest, we also have to look at the material issues of what's happening right now from our own worldview that works in our own interest. Because everything that they put out is going to work in their interest, even when it sounds like it's going to work for you. And we saw that, even with Obama. Obama just he was a neo-colonial puppet. You know what I'm saying? So these are things that we have to be able to recognize. And from the reparations in the World Tribunal on Reparations in 1982 that was created, we've been fighting for reparations ever since, and been getting reparations. Because from that process, we organized one of the first reparation organizations called the African National Reparation Organization. And then we had we organized an organization of white people called the African People's Solidarity Committee, and their sole purpose is to go organize other white people to break up the unity that white people in generally have around the questions of Black people, and even and to get reparations for the African community. And they've been doing that since then. And then we have our mass organization, International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, that has a reparation campaign that you can go to the website now, npdom.org, and sign a petition around reparations. And then we have the Black Power Blueprint, which is the blackpowerblueprint.org, that has that's building all over the world. And right now, building in St. Louis, Missouri, where we have a One Africa, One Nation farmers market, where there's a Hoover House, a red, black, and green 50-foot flagpole that is flying the red, black, and green flag, which is the continuation of Garvey work, which has over 50 economic institutions that's building, again, all over the world to practically and materially unite Africa and African people all over the world. We have organization right now on the ground in South Africa, but the Black Power Blueprint is fighting, and a lot of the reparations is contributing to building, for the community right now. We have a fourplex that is building to allow brothers that's coming out of prison to be able to get back on their feet and participate in a program that is going to contribute to the community and get brothers and sisters back on their feet to be able to integrate back into society, without missing a beat. And one of the fourplex will be named after Mafunde Lake, who was a political prisoner that did 31 years for organizing right here in Alabama, where I'm at. And so we have to be able to, do practical things, because we want that practical unity, that material unity, where we're not just talking, but we organizing to build the capacity to govern and take power ourselves, because they're not going to give us power. They're not going to give us the things that we asking. We're going to have to take power in the same way that they took this land, the same way they took us from Africa, snatched us up and brought us here for their interest. We're going to have to take power and organize ourselves to take our resources back. And we coming for everything that's ours. We want everything that's ours. We want everything that they got, because everything they got belongs to Africa and African people and other colonized people in the world. And we have to be clear on these things with our own agenda and our own perspective and our own worldview. And we have to fight to get reparations. And we have to fight on every front. There's not, as a revolutionary, there's no stone that you don't turn over. You know what I'm saying? We want to fight in every capacity to be able to do it, but we want to do it in an organized way. That's why Garvey was building one organization with one aim and one destiny, that had one leadership that was guiding them to one particular. That's why Garvey was so successful. That's why Garvey was unifying millions of African people all over the world. That's how they came up with the red, black, and green flag. And to this day, you see African nations represent some aspect of that flag. And so, in closing, we need a revolution, and we got to be clear on that. And we need to overturn colonialism, and we have to have clear theory and a worldview and leadership that can get us to that end. Because again, our ultimate goal has to be to govern, to have power of our own lives, and to be able to work in our own interests. And we have to fight for reparations, and we have to unify as a people under the leadership of the African working class. So I just want to say in closing that we got a few things coming up too. African Liberation Day, May 28th. Check it out, alduhuru.org. We do a political education every Sunday. Omari taught me at 8 a.m. You can check it out. If any questions, let me know. Again, appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the this venue to be a part of this panelist, and I really appreciate the work that's happened to make this happen, comrades. And let's get free. Let's continue this revolution, and let's take power. Uhuru.
Wow. All I can say is wow. Between Hakim, Kobina, and now we have coming up a producer, podcast host, vocational teacher, criminal justice paralegal. He pronounces his name Omari, Ajamu, Ajamu, excuse me, Ajanaku. And forgive me for not rehearsing that enough. But if we could bring him right on, I'm excited about hearing the rest of this.
I need you to be loud.
I am black, I am unique. I come from ancient kings.
From the beginning.
I am black, I am unique. I come from ancient kings, queens. When you look at me, what do you see? I am black, I am proud to be me.
Oh man. First, I gotta give my brothers their flowers, man. Listening to them was incredibly inspiring, and knowing they've devoted themselves to the upliftment and the generational cohesion of our people, man, it's inspiring for me, and so I feel honored and privileged and blessed to be around a group of people doing this and as committed as they are, as well as deemed worthy to come speak about certain issues and certain topics within our community itself. My name, Omari Ajamu Ajanaku. It's Swahili from East Africa and Kenya. Omari means the highest mountaintop close to God. Ajamu means he who fights for what he wants. And Ajanaku means free and wealthy people. And I think it's time to get intentional, to get specific. I think the most important thing, and this is me being selfish, the most important thing I've ever done is to be a husband first and a father second. Because my family tree wasn't there, so I decided to create it myself. That narrative changes, as the brother said in the first, I believe Hakim, he said, what we do present is the future itself. So now they look back on the family tree, and it's a different narrative that's been said. And it's by intention, by dedication, and by consistent efforts. My topic, here we go, integration versus separation. I feel before we dissect each, we need to define the terms. One of my biggest issues in my community is we don't get specific. We don't comprehend the words being discussed and the totality of them when it comes to their meaning. In my opinion, it causes us to lose focus and settle for less. And by the time we realize it, that the contract, the doctrine, it's already been signed and it's in paperwork. So now it's too late. So then we have to go backwards before we can go forwards because we didn't prepare, we weren't informed, and we didn't prevent us being taken advantage of once again. The meaning of integration is the act of incorporating and combining into a whole. The meaning of separation is the state of being moved apart. In my opinion, there's pros and cons to both. To keep us objective, these are the questions I want to focus on. Which one is more holistic and progressive for the next generation? Is one. Which will aid them toward their economic independence? Two. Which benefits the children more toward their emotional and mental development? Three. And four, which will result in the children being in a safe and healthy environment. And what I'm understanding as I get older and more mature is to better understand the present and future, you must understand the past. And the first thing I'm going to do is break down the foundation of the United States. As the second speaker, the brother, elaborated on eloquently, essentially the U.S. was built on stolen land, slave labor, and legislative control that benefited one racial group to the detriment of all others. Because we have to remember, it came to a point where for one group to read and write was a punishable offense by death. And so I want you guys to take a second and truly understand that somebody had to advocate for that in a court of law. There were steps and procedures. Somebody had to overlook and edit the document, take the right signatures to get it passed. That stated, if we read a simple book, if we comprehend words and knowledge and verbs and adjectives, it's a punishable by death and it's against the law. This is what we're dealing with. So the racial group that wrote the policies and procedures, laws, which are statutes, city ordinances, the Constitution itself of the country, were the same racial group who took the land, used as slave labor, and benefited most from that legislative control. One thing we also need to keep in mind is that technically we're deemed 60% of a man and not deemed a human being, which made the inhumane treatment legal because they, in their opinion, in their head, they aren't men to begin or women to begin. They're chattel, like cattle, pigs, and chickens. So from us being castrated to lynched to raped to reading being a punishable offense by law to kidnapping to church bombings to stealing land and property to police brutality to arson, which is deliberately setting fire to property, to mass incarceration, to police genocide, to miseducation, All this was and is facilitated and performed by one main racial group. And this is the same group which some sought to integrate us with. So let's get specific. Who, what, when, where, why, how? Let's get specific. So I'm doing integration first. Who? African Americans joining Europeans. What? Will be legally entering European establishments, places where we would not be welcomed, even enforceable by law. The main area that I'm focused on is the 50s to the 70s, 19. Where? The United States of America. Why? From doing my research, the thought process was so that the children would have access to more opportunities and resources while ending the cycle of hate. And how it would happen is by legislation. Separation, same energy. Who, what, when, where, why, how? Separation, who? Excuse me. African Americans staying with themselves. What? Becoming self-sufficient, depending on ourselves for goods and services. The same time period, 50s to the 70s. Where? United States of America. Why? So that the children will learn to depend on themselves in a safe and community environment. How? By group economics. So let's get a little bit more deeper into it. This is my assessment after studying both and the history and embracing the reality. Integration, again, is the act of forcing incorporation by law. The negatives, I always start with the negatives first. Get that rain out the way, then the sun is waiting for us. So we're going to make it. The negatives, we were not deemed a human being. By law, 60% we were. And one of the biggest things I have issues with is that there was and is no African-American hate crime law that would give us some sort of legislation protection. A hate crime bill specifies that if bodily injury results or if such acts of intimidation involves the use of firearms, explosive, or fire, individuals can receive prison terms of up to 10 years, while crimes involving kidnapping, sexual assault, or murder can be punishable by life in prison or the death penalty. In my opinion, by passing that law, it would give us some type of legal protection needed to ensure accountability from those who sought to harm our men, take advantage of our women, and miseducate our children. The reality that this law wasn't and isn't passed, in my opinion, tells me that they wanted us to be subjected to the violence of those enabled to do so by law. We will be legal prey, forced to coincide with our legal predator for the sake of emotion, selfishness, and a lack of confidence in our economic independence. By joining them, our children will be traumatized daily and suffer from the Black inferiority complex, which teaches them that they are less than. Our women will be taken advantage of and be used for their bodies, while our men will be physically and economically demasculated and stripped from the home, knowing that retaliation or defense of their families, even when justifiable, would result in death or a best life in prison. So the Black inferiority complex, for those who don't know, is showing you everything except you. It teaches you that the things you have naturally are less than, and it won't equate to your success. I'll go more into it a little later. Just breaking it down bit by bit. The positives. Here comes the sunlight. This would give us faster access to resources and opportunities that would normally take us longer to attain. The limited resources and opportunities offered will cause us to compete with ourselves to our detriment as a culture of sabotage is created. We'll start sabotaging each other's success, knowing that everyone would not be able to capitalize off of the limited resources they would offer us. For that small percentage who does make it, they will have to work harder and longer as they are underpaid and undervalued. They will say from these opportunities you can take back what you learn and earn to better your people as a whole, but who will want to build up a people seeking to sabotage their success, even if they are their own? This is the manipulation of integration. And this is what we're seeing now, even with affirmative action. It's a certain percentage that gets these resources. You know, I've even been to job interviews where it's 3 or 4 African Americans in there. We look around and you understand the game. And so now we're having to compete with each other for less than, instead of investing in each other for more than. Separation, the state of being moved apart. Start with the rain, the negatives. We will lose our immediate access to resources and opportunities. We will make less money individually, but would own everything and dictate our future collectively. Our businesses will be attacked, looted, and set aflame, but as long as we own our insurance companies and banks, we'll always be able to rebuild. Our independence and self-reliance would intimidate outside communities, and they will find reasons to justify the hate and violence toward us because of our economic independence. Upon documenting our self-reliance, the white power structure would then use any means necessary to discourage us from cohesion. They use tactics such as government programs, drugs, guns, women from outside nationalities, money and fame, sports as well as crime to disassemble our organization. Inevitably, they will infiltrate our community and pay representatives to influence integration under the guise of success and opportunity for our people. In reality, it wouldn't be for our betterment, but for the control of our skills and our talents, while ensuring that we do not become too powerful or too self-governed. They will promise those representatives a plate at their table, but only to eat the food that they provide for them, and the position of power will be short-lived. The representatives wouldn't realize it until too late, but the moment they are no longer useful, or the moment when someone else presents an opportunity to make more money, they will strategically be killed or stripped of their perceived status and power. And this is what we've seen through history. If we're embracing the reality, imagine if we had our own African American basketball league. Imagine if we never signed to the NBA, because it's predominantly African American anyway. Same thing with our football leagues. It seems that if you look around on the biggest moneymakers in society, and this is my opinion, sports is one, entertainment is the other, criminal justice and that system is the third. And who dominates those different avenues? Let's move on. The positives. Time for that sunlight. Our children will be surrounded by love and cohesion in a safe, uplifting environment of self-respect and dignity. Our women will be protected and put on the pedestal they deserve to be on, and our men will be empowered to be men with no fear of being killed for existing or being taken advantage of economically. We wouldn't be fighting each other for the limited resources they have to offer us, but would instead work harder and longer to ensure the longevity of our community's economic independence. We'll own our own grocery stores and farms to feed the community. And these are the pillars of economic independence that, in my opinion, our grocery stores to feed the community, our schools to teach our children, our banks and insurance agencies so we can own our loans for rebuilding. Because we've seen in history that when we go to them for insurance, when it's time for them to accept the money, then it's quality business, it's quality communication, it's accountability and consistency. But when it's time to cash out and take out the money that we've put in, now there's a miscommunication. Now there's barriers. Now there's justifications. We're not able to get what we've been paying into and what we deserve. Our own criminal justice system for protecting and accountability, in our own hospitals to care and heal for those needing care. So the 5 pillars of economic independence, in my opinion: grocery stores, the farms to feed us, schools to teach us, our own banks and insurance agencies to fund us and allow us to rebuild, our criminal justice system to have accountability on a holistic level, an unbiased level, and hospitals to heal and care for those needing assistance. Even our political positions of power will be represented by one who looks like us and will be chosen for the community by the community. Now, here's the important part I want people to understand. If we wanted to do business with outside communities, we could. The difference in this context versus integration will be leverage. With separation, we will be able to meet them on mutual grounds instead of begging for little to nothing with our children's future and well-being at stake. And we all know when it comes to business, if you have nothing to offer, you're going to have to come up off something. That percentage, you lose that percentage because it's not mutual. So with our own independence, we can meet them where if we wanted to, it will be mutual. Now it's a business partnership instead of a work for hire, an independent contractor. In conclusion, and even before I get to that, let me just talk to the people a little bit. I think I'm good on time. The biggest thing I'm seeing is that we don't have confidence in ourselves. We look at the past and we see how, and this is the consensus that I'm hearing from my community, is that they don't see the progress. They don't see it. The same things are happening when it comes to police brutality, mass incarceration. Is like what actually happened. And one thing I challenge my peers on, and even my elders, is that now physically we're in slightly better conditions, but mentally I think we're doing worse because now we're distracted so much. Before we had purpose, we had community, and I think the greatest organization that we've ever had was the Montgomery bus boycott, I believe, of the 1950s, because then we asserted our economic power, like the brother stated. If you wanted somebody to move, if you wanted somebody to feel what you're saying, affect our bottom line. And so now with that, we seized our own, and we were consistent and unwavering, and we had unity with it. And we weren't worried about self, but worried about people. And so I think that's the biggest thing that it's time to get back to. And like the brother stated first, is to be that tree. You might not have any trees around you. You have to be that tree yourself. And from you doing it, for you leading by example on a consistent basis, from you dedicating yourself and being unwavering with the energy and willing to lose everything, then you'll influence that in the next generation to take your mantle and they'll carry it on. Another thing I'm seeing is people are scared to lose their jobs. They're scared to get canceled or scared to get scorned on social media. When we got to remember, people were losing their lives. People were getting felonies. People were getting knocked down and bomb threats all times of the night. People were getting harassed on a consistent basis, character assassination tactics. You tell me you worry about a social media post? This is the reality, and we need to embrace it. So I think it's time that we just find those who are similar to us. We lead by example, and we invest in the children. And the children influence the older generation because it's a child, it's the future. And some of us are going to have to die off with time. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And then the children, they'll do better for their children. And then it's our job to influence and get out the way. In conclusion, I feel the best choice for any community, not just ours, any community, is to be separate, to build themselves independently. Then, when having enough leverage and economic power, collaborate with outside communities for mutual gain. At this point, I feel it will be difficult for us to separate. And I'm speaking to our community, the African American community, and have our own section for ourselves. But if there's a little entity, a Chinatown, and other areas representing certain ethnic groups, then certainly we should be able to come together and build a little Africa. That's the 5 necessary resources for economic independence. Again, grocery stores and farms to feed, schools to teach, bank and insurance agencies to loans and rebuilding, criminal justice system, so that when we are afflicted with unjust, we have our own prosecutors. Because it's kind of hard for a prosecutor to charge a police officer and they went to the same alma mater. It's kind of hard for a judge to sentence a police officer when we go golfing on the weekend and their uncle was on the board of directors with me at a local nonprofit. And so it's a conflict of interest for them. And so I feel like we have to have our own that's unbiased and neutral and has our best interests at heart, not socioeconomic status. Because another thing in the criminal justice system, we spoke about this, people don't understand, but a public defender's job is to lose. Their job is to take a plea deal so that the prosecution can build their socioeconomic status charging us. Because you got to remember, from prosecution comes district attorney. From district attorney goes judge, House of Representatives, the Senate, Congress, mayor, governor. That's how they build their career, is prosecuting us. And so it's time to embrace the reality. It's time to have our best interests. It's time to be informed, to prepare, and to prevent. And it's time to do what's best for us and be unwavering with that energy, because what we do now in the present is an investment in our future, because it's either regression or progression. There is no middle ground. So before ending, I would like to read an excerpt from A Letter to My Children. You all saw the film film trailer. And the project is a soundtrack, a philosophical poetry book, and a film. And the purpose of it was to leave some wisdom and guidance for my children upon death, aside from my life insurance policy, to leave them something behind that will help them navigate the many traps set for them in this integrated society. The key subjects addressed are communication and relationships, success and career development, peer pressure, and conflict resolution. And the poem is called The Blue-Eyed Doll. I'm about to read a little fast because we're going low on time. The Blue-Eyed Doll. My children say this one, but I must tell them no. Today they won't understand, but if they did, I would say prioritize you and those who look like you. Find you a doll that looks like you and cling to it. Know that it is the finest form of beauty for you, because you will see millions of blue-eyed dolls, millions of pale-skinned blonde-haired dolls, and millions of other dolls that look like other people. And that's okay. It's okay to be around people who look different than you. But what's not okay is that you will also see millions of disfigured and deranged black dolls, millions of dark-skinned dark dolls that look like the blue-eyed doll, but only with darker skin. Few will positively reinforce your vision of beauty. Few will show you your natural hair and skin and your natural body shape. Few will give you a healthy example of what it means to love yourself unconditionally. Most dolls that look like you will show you dysfunction and teach you that beauty is everything but you. And when you get tired of looking at so many of those dolls, which are intentionally created to be unsightly, that blue-eyed doll will be there, waiting to show you what beauty should be, waiting to show you what you aren't. That blue-eyed doll would teach you that your natural hair should be straightened and pressed. That blue-eyed doll would teach you that your brown eyes should be blue or at the worst green. That blue-eyed doll would teach you that your skin is too dark and needs to be lighter. That blue-eyed doll would teach you that the shape of your body is something to be ashamed of. That blue-eyed doll would teach you that beauty is everything but what God has blessed you with. That blue-eyed doll would teach you that her mate should be your mate And as you get older, society will do its best to confirm and reinforce the teachings of the blue-eyed doll. In the media and on billboards, in pictures and in movies, that blue-eyed doll will be there to remind you of what you learned at this age. And without realizing it, you will begin to press your hair or wear weave for it to be straight. You will wear contacts or get surgery for your eyes to appear blue. You will get your skin bleached or apply synthetic creams for it to appear lighter, all to look like that blue-eyed doll. So no, my children, put that doll back. I don't mind if you play with it from time to time, because I feel the blue-eyed doll deserves respect, just like any other doll. But no, I will not buy it. I will not allow it in my house, and I will not allow it to pollute your mind in any way, because one day you will understand and realize the power of the blue-eyed doll. Thank you.
Your organization is one of the staples of just about anything. You have to be organized to achieve anything. You have to find out what you need to do, what you want to accomplish, and what steps it's going to take to do that.
Love. How do you know that it's true? When they say to you that my love is stronger than glue. Love. What does it mean? Is it when they try to get in between, or when they come to watch your team? Love. It's time without rushing. Support and love without lustfully touching. Well, moments are enormous, and the world seems so dormant. Intentions. What are yours? Because even family can be a double-edged sword. So adore and love everything about yours. Keep the mind at home and not on world tours. Love is staying true and wanting more for them than you want for you. Love. How do you know that it's true? When they say to you that my love is only for you. Love. What does it mean? Is it when they buy expensive things, or when they support your dreams? Love.
To achieve anything, you have to find out what you need to do, what you want to accomplish, and what steps it's going to take to do that.
I'm assuming you're talking to me. It's called A Letter to My Children. My economic system was, the 5 pillars. I'm assuming they're talking about the 5 pillars. The 5 will be schools, farms, grocery stores. It will be hospital, bank, and it will be a criminal justice system for accountability.
I'm not able to hear.
I think you're muted. Planned Parenthood. Oh,
Here
okay.
I go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it says Planned Parenthood promotes abortion relentlessly among Blacks. 80% of Planned Parenthood's 60 efficient abortion mills are located in inner city areas with a Black population above 50%. Do you guys have any comments on that?
I mean, I feel it influences a culture of frugal and dysfunctional relationships, because now, before laying down with that person and having sexual relations, in their head, by programming and manipulation, I have a way out. Instead of having the intentionality in longevity, it's now a culture that's been used to deceive people into this, which is, terminating and killing our future leaders and future president and future nonprofit owners and LLC owners and scientists and doctors and teachers.
Yeah, and indeed, and you know what's critical with the question related to Planned Parenthood is that you know Planned Parenthood is associated with the eugenics project that started in you know Europe and Germany, you know, and which is part of the promotion of you know white supremacy, that you know white race is superior than the black race, and eugenics was about studying to figure out how to make their recessive genes, how to make them dominant, right? And to put an end to our dominance, they come up with Planned Parenthood to really plan our destruction, while they plan their way to emerge into the eugenics hierarchy of race.
And here's a
Yeah, and
question.
I would just briefly, you know, I appreciate the comments and the responses too from the other panels. I really appreciate that, and we should, you know, people should look at the history of Planned Parenthood. You know, being that they had a program for 40 years. You know that I think it was 38 states where they had an IQ test. You know that if you failed the IQ test, they would sterilize the child to and I think in North Carolina, a woman just won who was a part of that, maybe like 10 years ago, just won a lawsuit against them because they I think the program lasted from like 32 to 72 or 34 to 74. 1974 is when they stopped it. But if you failed the IQ test, which was culturally biased from the jump, then they would sterilize you against what unbeknownst to your parents or anybody else. I think you should look at that. But I think the ultimate thing is that when we see those things, the question is, what do we do? How do we organize ourselves to not only push them out, but build the things necessary for us to be able to govern ourselves?
And it looks like the next question's for Hakeem. Hakeem, what made you connect with the history or Black culture as a Black man?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially coming from someone like myself that happens to be biracial, right? And so, you know, my entire life has been raised inside a Black community. I wrote a semi-autobiography called Little Brown Bear, Looking Through the Eyes of a Biracial Child Raised in Black America. I was fortunate not to be raised in a white community, fortunate not to be raised in a dominant white environment. So I was in a community in which my community was repressed. And I remember growing up my entire life hearing things about great Blackness and how proud we were to be Black, and then hearing disparaging comments about what happened in the past. And I developed a sense of appreciation for who I was and what my struggle was in my historical connection through my father, through my grandmother, and what they had went through to get to where they had got to in that place that I was now born in. So my lifelong association affinity within the culture that raised me gave me the connection to history and Black culture as a Black man. Salute.
And then here is a question. It's quite clear our need to engage, educate, and energize the youth into holistic Black nationalism. What do you think is the most effective way to do the combating the many distraction and culture pathologies in our communities?
Examples. Like the two great men that's talking today, we need examples. You can say things and describe things and give pictures, but it's something different when you walk in the room. You see my man's jacket on. You see him with the trim. When he walks in the room, it's a certain energy he conveys. My other panels, when he opens his mouth and communicates a certain way, people stop what they're doing and listen. They need that tangible example to follow and to take from and to do better than.
Yeah, I would add. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I would add. You know, I think like the brother just said that we need to set examples. You know, and we need organization. And when we think about, like, we talk about Garvey a lot. You know what I'm saying? But Garvey was building organizations, and I remember even reading that some people, when they knew that the Black Star Line ship was coming, people would just go to the shore just to be able to see it. You know what I'm saying? Or there were some people that didn't have anything, but they was donating 10 cents to the Black Star Line because it was something that was tangible. Even Garvey created, and I don't know if most people know this, but how we got black dogs today was because of Garvey and the UNIA movement, the Garvey movement that began to create black dogs. So so little black girls could have something to play with that reflected them. And I think we have to do the same thing. Like right here in Huntsville, Alabama, we have like a community garden that we organize the community to talk about to build self-sufficiency and give us the ability to feed ourselves. We have to be able to do things like that in the community and turn that, and that's right in the middle of a housing project. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be able to do those type of things where, because everybody's not going to hear what you're saying, but everybody because everybody learn differently, but we want to, some things have to be tangible that I can touch, that I can feel, that I can, when I walk out my door and I see this, then I understand what you mean by self-sufficiency. Then I understand what you mean by independence. We have a Black Power FM radio station in St. Petersburg where young Africans that can put their music out, Black Power 96.3, and we have to be able to do those type of things in order for people to be able to understand and participate in a way that otherwise they may not be able to hear it.
And that's in Alabama, that radio station, Black Power 96.3. What's that location of that 96.3?
All right, yeah, I was muted. I couldn't get off mute. Okay, my bad. The radio station is in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's at the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it's Black Power FM 90.3. And you can get the app too. And if you go to blackpower96.org, you can download the app and you can listen to it, anywhere in the world. You know what I'm saying? Uhuru.
I wanted to share this because they shared this. I think they were asking about a newspaper, and Omari said his newspaper, and I wanted also to make sure they knew how to find you, Kobina, which is the Burning Spear newspaper, correct?
Yeah, the Burning Spear newspaper is the longest lasting revolutionary paper in the world. We've been printing that paper since 1968. And you can go to theburningspear.com and get you a copy. Of course, we knew Marcus Garvey had the Negro World that was going all over the world. And we also have the Burning Spear newspaper. And it was before Huey P. Newton passed away, he did a speech at the Uhuru House in Oakland that said, if you destroy one organization, you didn't do anything, because even though we don't have the Black Panthers, we got the Uhuru House, and even though we don't have the Black Panther newspaper, we got the Burning Spear. And this is, from a lecture that Huey P. Newton did before he passed away out there in Oakland, California. But the Burning Spear is been in continuous print for over 50 years.
Let's see if I can. I'm just going to scroll through and see if I see any other comments. Let's see. Let's see. So here's one.
I think I see some questions on Facebook. I don't know if you see that or not.
Probably. Well, go ahead and answer what you see. I mean, I don't want to miss anybody's question, especially while we got you here. Yeah. Go ahead and read.
I see two different questions that I see right off the top. Yeah, and Maiza put in that blackpower96.org is the website, but then there's a Arshad Muhafiz, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right, and he says, what movements throughout history has been most effective and most enduring in educating, organizing, and community building? We can study and learn lessons, strategies, and principles. That was his question. And that was another one from Lula, but I guess give people the opportunity to answer that question first.
Yeah, I see those now. Let me post it just in case they want to read it.
And I would say just because I just read, I'll just say Garvey. I mean, I think Garvey led Garvey gave us the blueprint to organize it into what the objective was. I think Garvey probably more than anybody, laid out the blueprint of taking power and fighting in the best interest of the African working class. And if you notice, every movement since then take something from Garvey. Even people that was against Garvey at that time take something from Garvey, and they taking pieces of Garvey's movement during that time. And I would say that the Uhuru movement, Chairman Omari Yesatella, continues that work of Garvey and has had 50 years. This year is our 50-year anniversary, where 50 years of relentless struggle towards Africa's redemption. But those would be the two that I would pull out, immediately. Uhuru.
And there's also, Lulu had a question. How do you all speak to all of the negative perspective that we deploy the mindset behind? How do we step out of this place of stuck?
Yeah, the mindset is a crucial place and the seat of our, central being. So, we've been constantly combating negative stereotypes since we've come in contact with Europeans and colonialism, all the way back to the Aryan invasions of ancient India, right, in which they created the caste society, in which the darker people in India would be at the lowest caste, right? So white supremacy goes way back into ancient BC. And so really, when we look at the 60s movement, when we started really advertising that Black is beautiful, really started instilling a sense of self-esteem and love for each other, that has to be continuously reinforced within our community and culture, because those images of those icons from the 60s, those, from the Jim Crow era that emerged out of slavery, those images still persist today, and our children are still impacted by them today. So we have to continue to reinforce positive images, and like the brother was mentioning earlier about role models, who do we see, and when individuals open their mouth, the individuals that we see, what is coming out of their mouths. And so we have to produce that positivity to combat these negative stereotypes and negative perspectives that persist in our minds based on images and icons that we inherited post-slavery into the Jim Crow era into now.
Oh, yeah, right on. And I think this is why we have to have theory and practice. You know what I'm saying? We have to have the practical things on the ground, because sometimes it's difficult, because I know I'm a visual learner myself, so sometimes is like I can listen to people, but it's when I see something is when it may have a different impact, on me, you know what I'm saying? So even like, when we look at some of the organizations, like the Black Panther Party, like he mentioned, like in the 60s, and the Black Power Revolution of the 60s. I remember reading this story about the FBI trying to come and isolate the Panthers, and they was talking to people in the community, and they ran into this one woman, and she said to her, y'all for those communists, you should be against communists, and you should be against those people over there. And they was talking about the Panthers, and the lady said, I don't know what the hell you talking about. All I know is that that's my free breakfast program on there, and I'll fight you tooth and nail for that. You know what I'm saying? And when they had free health clinics, they had free breakfast program, because this gave the people the confidence necessary that if we can feed our own children without other assistance, then what else can we do? We can have a free health clinic. What else can we do? We can have the ability to govern and police ourselves in a way that works in our best interest. So I think one thing that we have to be clear is that they have propaganda that want to perpetuate defining us for their interest. It doesn't really define us for our interest. We have to define ourselves in our own best interest, and even define them in our best interest in the real way. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not gonna do that. And I think that a lot of times that's what conflict us even with education, because education, I remember I was in the 5th grade when I said I don't want to learn nothing else from them. You know what I'm saying? Because everything that they was teaching me was attacking my community. It was attacking my grandmother. It was attacking my mother. It was attacking my father. And it wasn't giving me any solutions. And what I understood that just like Harriet Tubman, I knew that we had to fight for freedom and not for inclusion. And so I would say look at the 14-point platform of the African People's Socialist Party. And you know,
and Maisa did share that in the comment section. So just so Maisa did share that 14-point. Right
on.
She shared it in the comment section. But I did, you know, since we're going to close out, I wanted to give you guys a chance to leave your contact information for anybody that's watching, so that they can get in touch with you if they needed to or reach out.
Yeah, I'm looking to
say it or put it in the.
I mean, you can put it in the chat or you can say it out loud, however you want to do it. Whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, the best way probably is either email, which is Kobina Uhuru, UHURU, at gmail.com. And if you're interested in learning more about the African People's Socialist Party, APSP Uhuru.org. That's APSPUHURU.org.
Yeah, likewise, I'm very easy to get in contact with. I'm all over social media as Hakim Crampton. That's HAKIM Crampton. I'm also HakimCrampton.com, my new website. And just, you know, social spoken flow poet on Instagram and Twitter. Very easy to be reached. So salute.
Thank you. I did want to thank the audience today for watching day 1 of the Black Effect. We will be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Tomorrow, day 2 of the Black Effect, we'll be talking about criminal justice, political prisoners, and the abolitionist movement. If you'd like to contact the Plus Party or Media and Productions, you can contact us at 888-806-6748. You can reach our website at www.plustvproductions.com, and you can email us at info@plustvproductions.com. Thank you, guys. It's been a wonderful wisdom night for me, and I appreciate you taking the time out to come share.
Thank you. Thank you
and educate. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. Appreciate you.
Have a wonderful night.
Salute. Peace.